Moses had to deal with the anti-brassers who refused to look at the brazen serpent in the wilderness. And I'm sitting here going, no, really? What? Moses had to deal with the anti-brassers who refused to look at the brazen serpent in the wilderness. And this is about the new COVID vaccine. And so this is, I guess, the anti-vaxxers, the anti-vax movement and things like that. So Moses had to deal with the anti-brassers who refused to look at the brazen serpent in the wilderness. My response was fairly straightforward. Not only is this an incredibly absurd use of a vitally important element of the biblical narrative, John chapter 3, Jesus' application in regards to the serpent in the wilderness, as a picture of Jesus being lifted up on the cross. But it is wildly inappropriate to apply it to the most unique, rushed, novel vaccine ever forced into the bloodstreams of a billion people. It seems that Big Eva has flown onto the scene. I don't... The fact that it has happened so rapidly, and maybe it's just because, okay, now the vaccine's ready, and so that's how it's going to happen. I don't know. Maybe that's what makes it seem like it's been fast and quick and things like that. I don't know, but it just seems to me like very, 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 very quickly there has been this outpouring of support for taking this novel, genetically based, absolutely unique vaccine. And there is an example of it from that perspective. Now, yesterday, Dr. Albert Mohler presented 7 points for consideration in regards to why he will take the vaccine as soon as it is available from a Christian worldview. And I'd like to respond to them in light of the fact that this is a completely unique situation. Let me just, without going into a lot of details, just remind us that the amount of wealth that will be flowing into the pharmaceutical arena as a result of what has taken place. Where's all the money going? It's leaving the middle class, okay? The money is leaving the middle class. It's going someplace. It's going into major corporations, Walmart, Target, Amazon, making record amounts of money. It's also going to the pharma companies, and you need to remember, these pharma companies, to my understanding, have been completely and thoroughly insulated as part of this warp speed project from any future legal action as to any negative results from these vaccines. There will be no. You're not gonna hear the. I saw a meme just a few moments ago before the program started. 10 years from now, you're going to be sitting at home and you're going to hear, if your loved one took the COVID-19 vaccine, call, da-da-da. That's not going to happen. There's going to be no $1 billion set aside, anything like that. Nope. They have no liability whatsoever. So let's just, can we just step back a second and put a few things on the table before I look at these points for consideration? This is a unique situation for multiple reasons. What's most frightening to me is that this is a man-made, media-driven panic. There was a study that came out just a few weeks ago that was immediately pulled from the site that posted it. It's only available on archive now. that dove into the numbers and basically said there really hasn't been excess mortality, and dove deeply into the numbers to say it looks like, because other forms of mortality have lessened, that there has been an inappropriate classification of COVID deaths. Now, we all know that that's been happening. The public representatives came out and said, if you die and you have a positive COVID test, it's a COVID death. A few days ago, and in fact, I have a clip here. Unfortunately, Rich left, so I can't play it. But I have a clip that I'll get to once Rich returns to the control room, where Anthony Fauci, yes, the Anthony Fauci, this past summer admitted in talking with virologists that the PCR testing that we're doing right now is subject to wild false positives, wild number of false positives. He admitted it. He talked about it. And so you have the deaths. Anybody, honestly, you can have a person in hospice on pain meds in their last week of life, and if they get coronavirus, that's what killed them. They wouldn't have lived another 5 days, but it doesn't matter. There's a positive PCR test for COVID. That's a COVID death. That's created a massively large number of deaths, which the media, and we don't have a free press in America any longer, the media as a group has used to create a massive sense of panic. Panic amongst the people. That's what's going on. And so the mindset is we have a horrible thing going on. People are dying in the streets. We've got to have refrigerator trucks. The CCUs are full, even though that's a complete fraud as well. It was from the start. I worked in a hospital. The CCU was almost always full. And that wasn't during any pandemic. They want it that way. That's how they survive. They plan things so as to have a certain amount of occupation. People don't understand these things. We have had a numbers game run on us about CCU beds. We've had a numbers game run on us about mortality rates and numbers. Let me play this for you. I've already introduced it to you. Listen to what Anthony Fauci says in this conversation this week in virology. Now, look, folks, This Week in Virology is not on CNN. It's not on MSNBC, and they have nobody on their in their staff that have any idea what any of this stuff is talking about. But listen to this clip. Listen what's said here.
Right. Again, a good question. And what is now sort of evolving into a bit of a standard that if you get a cycle threshold of 35 or more, that the chances of it being replication competent are minuscule. So that if somebody, and we have patients, and it's very frustrating for the patients as well as for the physicians. Somebody comes in and they repeat their PCR and it's like 37 cycle threshold, but you almost never can culture virus from a 37 threshold cycle.
Okay, now I understand why that did not go viral. Okay? I even tweeted, if I told you that Anthony Fauci said that anything over 35 cycles in a PCR test is worthless, how many of you would have any idea what I was talking about? And most people just honestly wrote back and said, I don't have any. I said, without Googling it. They're like, I don't know. I had a couple of doctors go, yeah, I do. It's significant, but I'm a doctor, so that's why I know. The PCR, the way that they are seeking to detect the signatures of this virus is by causing those little fragments that are identifiable in the shell of the virus to replicate themselves. And so you go through these cycles where it doubles it and doubles it and doubles it and doubles it, and it's so you get to 35, and what he's saying is once you get past that level, you can't have any confidence at all. He said minuscule. I thought that was interesting. You can have no confidence that once it finally comes up, says, there it is, that actually means anything, because you have magnified it, you've multiplied it so massively that it could be anything. I remember when my wife took, I think, at least 2, maybe 3 tests when she was still working. Always came back negative, but they always sent stuff back with her that said, even if it comes back positive, that doesn't mean that you have COVID-19. You might have had a cold recently or all sorts of other things like that. Why? Because that's how PCR tests work. So he's saying past 35 and beyond, worthless. What's the standard in the United States right now? 40 cycles. That's why we're getting this. We have right now a test-demic, not a pandemic. Because not only do you have the problem with the PCR, but we are also testing. You ready for this? 670 times more than we have at this point in time in any year past, for example, for flu. If you went back to 2017 to 2018, took the numbers of positives then, and then multiply it by 670, we had a worldwide pandemic in 2017, 2018. And you didn't even know about it, did you? Nope, nobody did. Because it's playing with numbers. All the death numbers, no one knows how many people die in the United States every single year, so you've got no context to put it in. So you can play with PCR, you can play with this stuff, and we have been gamed and gamed royally. So this has created a massive panic, even amongst, I know scholars. I've got a scholar in Twitter that follows me. And in the field he's in, he's great. But man, he's bought all this stuff. He's bought all of this stuff. It's just, there's people dying all over the place. It's like, if you applied your standards of scholarship to this area, you wouldn't believe in this stuff. But there you go. So there's the context. And that is why we have what's happening now. Think about it. We have hundreds of millions, because between Moderna and the other one, I think that's over 100 million right there. And that's just in the United States. They're already doing it in Britain and Russia and places like that. Hundreds of millions of these vaccines. And most of us are sitting there. I was sitting here until just recently thinking, this is similar to how we do flu shots and things like that. Until I started doing a little more reading in the articles that don't get viral because they're so complicated. And that's when I discovered this is the first time we've ever done this. Now, we've used this technology in extreme situations of like cancer and stuff like that. But for a virus, we've not done this. We are using our CRISPR technology, the technology is developed really over the past 15 years, to play with genetics. And we've created an mRNA strand, a messenger RNA strand. Now, if you know anything about genetics, and you're going, what do you know about genetics? I was a department fellow in biology in college. I raised 35,000 Drosophila melanogaster fruit flies my senior years studying a certain locus on a particular gene. I know a little something about it. It's dated knowledge, but I know something about it. And if you know anything about genetics, you know that our chromosomes are made up of DNA. We've mapped the human genome now. DNA is that double-stranded nucleotide. And RNA is a single strand. And so RNA is very much involved in the transcription of DNA, where you've got certain enzymes that unzip the DNA and then read it and create a single strand that comes out from that, and then it zips it back up again. It's just, talk about intelligent design. It is astonishing. I mean, the ability of the creator to make these things is just so far beyond anything we even have now. We've just now, after all this time, come up with the ability to start playing with his stuff, which is frightening. In a Christian worldview, it would be great. Without a Christian worldview, it is the stuff of the worst nightmares of the worst dystopian films and books you'll ever see. It is I Am Legend all over again. So anyway, so we've come up with this technology where we have made an RNA strand. That's what's in the vaccine. And the RNA strand goes into cells in your body and instructs those cells, whatever else they're doing, to start producing antibodies to the coronavirus. So you're hijacking the cells of your body and using genetic information to cause them to produce antibodies for the coronavirus. Now, this has never been done before. Any other vaccine, you'd need to have 1, 3, and 5-year safety studies. There are no 1-year, 3-year, and 5-year safety studies here. Can't be. Operation Warp Speed. Can you imagine any situation that could warrant immediate introduction of hundreds of millions of vaccines into a population with less than 4 months of human studies? I can't think of one. And if you had not produced the panic that has taken over the minds of, it looks like, at least 40%, if not 70%, of the human population, this would never be happening. We'd never allow it. We'd never allow it. It wouldn't be done. But we're doing it. But we're doing it. And I simply say to anyone, do you think maybe there might be grounds for being at least somewhat hesitant here? That there might be something else going on here that would explain this sudden overthrow? I mean, how many people have I already... I was listening to doctors while I was driving. I had a lot of hours of driving last week. These doctors on Fox News. Oh, it's perfectly safe. Oh, we've just had no problems at all. It's wonderful. The number of tests they have done in comparison to the number of doses they're putting out is tiny. No long-term studies at all. Now, I hope and pray that these vaccines will not cause long-term damage. So one of the greatest dangers is autoimmune problems. There are people who have raised, they said, how do you know that cells will not incorporate this RNA? Because cells have the capacity of taking an RNA strand and turning it into a DNA strand and storing it in the cell, making it a part of the genome. They have the ability to do that. The scary thing is, you know what I hear back? Our models do not predict this. Our models do not predict this. I hope that's true. I hope that's true. But every model so far about this virus has been one big fat lie. And so when someone says, it's your Christian duty, I look them in the eye and go, and what's the 5-year safety study on this? Not just for me, but for my children and my grandchildren? What's the 5-year safety? Well, we don't have any of that. But we assure you it's safe. They did that in 1976 too. Go back. Look at the people who could not walk the rest of their lives because of the flu vaccine in 1976. And that wasn't a genetic thing. That wasn't nearly as scary as this. And yet, if you take the time to actually read up, you're called a conspiracy theorist. And the fact is, there is suppression of information on this subject by big tech. I mean, after the live showing of this program, it may never be seen again for all I know, because I'm just simply logically saying, hey, there are reasons to go, I don't really want to insert man-manipulated genetic material into my body. Is that really difficult to understand? I hope it works. And if this was Ebola that had become aerolized and has a 75% kill ratio, okay, it's worth the risk. But the WHO's own serum study said that for people under age 70, the survival rate for coronavirus is 99.95%. You're not allowed to talk about that. I think there should be open discussion of all this. Don't you think? The very fact there isn't makes me go, a lot of strange coincidences here. A lot of strange coincidences. So, the 7 points consideration from Dr. Moeller, real quick. First, Christians do not believe in medical non-interventionism. I agree 1,000%. Don't have any problem with that at all. That's it. Secondly, we must consider the derivation of the vaccine itself. So in other words, he had some very interesting discussion here about HEK 293 from a aborted fetus in the Netherlands in the 1960s. A number of the people that were working on this vaccine basically said that's not relevant because we're just doing the RNA marker. So I'll be honest with you, I don't know how the HEK 293 line was relevant outside of maybe testing. I don't know how it would have been relevant in the development with. Did that provide the mRNA that was then used in CRISPR? I don't know. But there was a lengthy discussion there about that issue and a few other things that go along with it. I won't go into right now, though it is well worth going into that particular discussion. The fourth issue is whether or not a medical treatment is made mandatory by governing authority, and I can guarantee you this will be. In Canada, they've just extended the mask mandate till December of next year. This is living by lies. This is living by lies. So what they're going to do is what's going to happen, what's happening in Canada is you either get vaccinated or you live the rest of your life in a mask. And even they have to realize that the masks are a joke. And so eventually we're going to force you or we're going to lock you up and take away your property. That's already happening in Canada. So the mandatory element of it, you bet. That's coming. Fifth principle for Christians thinking about vaccines deals with the common good, the issue of love of neighbor. Now, this is the big thing. In fact, the U.S. bishops, this is Breitbart, say Catholics have moral responsibility to be vaccinated against coronavirus. So the Catholics are on board, Roman Catholics are on board, and they are saying that, and this is why you have to wear masks. This is why you have to shut down your business. This is why you have to do all this stuff. Love your neighbor. Love your neighbor. So to love your neighbor, you must take an unknown risk with your life and the life of your children and your grandchildren. That's required of you to love your neighbor. For something that has a 0.05% mortality rate for people under the age of 70. I'm sorry, I don't buy that one. That's not loving your neighbor. That's not loving your neighbor at all. Common good argument. Sixth principle pertains to the integrity of the family and the authority of parents. Public schools will just absolutely demand it. No question, public schools will absolutely demand this. The seventh and final moral principle has to do with access and priority, which is perhaps the easiest of the seven to understand. Those who are at greater risk or serving the front lines of this pandemic ought to be the first in line to receive the vaccine, assuming it's safe. And again, I hope to God that it is. What if it isn't? What if there is a 5-year unforeseen autoimmune disaster? Who are we going to lose? The people that take care of us. I'm just left going, no, thank you. No, thank you. Anybody who is so fearful of a 0.05% mortality rate, feel free to take that risk. And the fact of the matter is, if hundreds of millions of people do that, that logically creates what's called herd immunity. And so we should all get to take our masks off. It won't happen. They won't let it happen. They have submission. They're going to keep pushing submission. Keep pushing submission. The scary thing to me is if come spring, you start hearing about COVID-21, then you will know. You will know beyond all certainty that this has been, we're following the script all the way along. Following the script all the way along. That's what's going on. My response to Dr. York is, Dr. York, thank you for all that you've done, but I really feel that tweet was not only tasteless in its utilization of John 3, but it simply ignores the completely unique situation that we are facing here and the realities that have brought us to the position we're in.